everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Standout Jobseeker podcast presented by JobScan. I'm your host, Sydney Myers. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. We are growing. We just recently set records in downloads per episode and listens per day. We also recently launched a newsletter on LinkedIn. So if you're not following JobScan on LinkedIn, follow us over there, and you can see the newsletter too. You can also just subscribe to the newsletter. It's called the Standout to match the podcast name. And that is a bi-weekly newsletter with various hacks and tips for your job search. The goal with that newsletter is to give you like really actionable hacks that you can use right away. So you should be able to read each edition of the newsletter and immediately have at least one or two things that you can go and do to speed up your job search and to make things easier for you. So go to LinkedIn and check that out. That newsletter is written by Rob Henderson, who is our internal certified professional resume writer. He also writes articles for our blog too, so you might have heard his name before. But he writes that newsletter every other week, so go subscribe to that on LinkedIn. It's called The Standout. You can also see it if you go to our company page, JobScan, and you can follow us there. Now, for this podcast, I usually do two types. I interview either a career expert, so maybe a career coach or a recruiter, or I interview successful career professionals. So like in our last episode, I interviewed Heather Stapp, who was the former VP of marketing for Nestle. And we talked about her career journey. And so you can hear from real people to see how did they get this job that I've always wanted, or how did they get that promotion, or how did they grow in their career? And so you can listen to those. In this episode, I'm going to interview a career expert. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because I'm curious as to which one y'all prefer, which kind y'all prefer. And maybe you don't have a preference. Maybe you like getting a little bit of both. But I want to hear if you prefer either the career coach, career expert interviews, or if you prefer hearing career stories from successful professionals. Let me know either if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can leave a comment, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review. And in your review, you can actually like type a message. So leave a review, and in your message, let me know if you have a preference of which kind of interview you like. And I'll take that into consideration. But for this episode, I'm interviewing Mark Mears, who is the author of the book, The Purposeful Growth Revolution. He's also been a C-suite level leader for over 20 years, worked for companies like PepsiCo, Pizza Hut, McDonald's, JCPenney, very successful. And so he comes with an interesting perspective of being the hiring manager and being the person who has to grow teams. So it'll be really helpful to hear his insights. And what we're going to talk about is how your personal brand affects your job search. Now, I'm doing a little bit of a longer intro here because I want to first approach this topic of your personal brand, being on the same page with why that's important. Because I don't know about you, but I know for me, sometimes when I hear a personal brand, I just it doesn't resonate with me, which is strange being a marketer. But I sort of think like personal brand, like it's a job search. Like I go into the interview, I answer the questions, I have my resume, it's my experience and the skills that I have. Like this whole personal brand thing, like it just feels so millennial and new age. But it actually is very important. And it always was important, even before we started talking about it or before we gave it a name. Because really, your personal brand is just who you are. It's what you're known for. It's the kind of person that you are. And that it has always been important to hiring managers and recruiters whenever they're trying to figure out who to hire. When I'm interviewing people and trying to figure out, who I want to interview first of all, and then who to hire, of course, I look at their skills and experience and their achievements. That's important. But I also want to get face to face. I want to do an interview and I want to talk to them. I want to see like, what kind of employee are you? How do you approach problems, or how do you prioritize, Or what do you look for in a job or in a company? Like, what kind of role do you want? What kind of career trajectory do you want? All of those things matter because I need to make sure that it aligns with the kind of person that I'm looking for. Do they have the personality I'm looking for? Do they have the kind of, work ethic is the simplest way to put it, but like, do they have the kind of work ethic I'm looking for? Or let's say I want this role to grow and eventually be a leadership role. Is that what they want in their career? And all of that matters because I've definitely had people on my team more than once who like we weren't really on the same page, and it can cause problems. And so your personal brand, or whatever you want to call it, whether it's your brand or just who you are as a person, soft skills, all of that really matters to a hiring manager whenever they're interviewing you. So don't take the whole personal brand thing for granted. It does make a difference, and it is important to effectively communicate your personal brand, to effectively communicate who you are and what kind of person you are, what kind of employee you are, what kind of teammate you are. So in this interview, now that we're kind of coming to this with a fresh mind and we're all on the same page as far as like how important this is, in this interview, we're going to talk about how to communicate your personal brand. We're going to touch a little more on why it's important, but really we're going to dig into your brand and how to use that to your advantage in the job search. So the main topics here are finding purpose in your job. So Mark Mears, his book, The Purposeful Growth Revolution, that's what that book is about a lot. So we're going to talk about how to find purpose in your job, therefore your job search. And we do get into why that is important too. That's kind of like other side topic, but we get into that too, why it's important and how to find purpose. And then we get into your personal brand and how to use it in your job search. And we dig into kind of like specific aspects of that, like, for example, being a problem solver and how you can use that to increase your chances of getting a job offer. So I want to thank Mark for joining the podcast and sharing his thoughts and experience here of being a leader and having hired so many people and growing teams. So definitely listen all the way through. Follow Mark on LinkedIn if you're not already, or connect with him. But let's get to the interview now. Thank you for listening to this podcast and this episode. I'm going to be joined now by Mark Mears. Okay, well, Mark Mears, thanks for joining the show. You're the author of The Purposeful Growth Revolution, 4 Ways to Grow from Leader to Legacy Builder. I definitely want to get into this purposeful growth idea and how job seekers can use that. How is that purposeful growth mindset important for job seekers? Or how can they apply that purposeful growth within their job search journey?
Well, first, let's talk about kind of why purpose matters. And I think COVID gave us all a bit of a time out to reflect deeply on not only what, but who matters most in our life. Mm-hmm. And I think societal trends were moving in this direction with millennials. But I think COVID gave us now an opportunity to say, I'm not sure I want to go back to a toxic work environment. We've seen the studies show that when it was called the Great Resignation, or I called it the Great Repurposing, people were leaving, and the number one reason was toxic work environment. Mm-hmm. And then one of the benefits of working with a sense of purpose is you're not just punching in and out of clock and getting paid every other week and just living for the weekend. You want to feel like what you're doing at work makes a difference. And studies have shown, just a Deloitte study that was recently released, said that almost 90% of millennials and Gen Z desire purpose in their work. And they want to work for companies that also have an eye towards the environment. Those were the one and two kind of top things people were looking for. And they want to make sure they're able personally to make a difference. And so I kind of strip it all down. You kind of have to know what lights you up. And it's different for all of us. But you got to find out what is that for you. And then you want to make sure that you align your purpose with your company's purpose or whoever you may be interviewing with. So there's that really symbiotic relationship where their purpose aligns with yours and yours with them, to where you really feel like you can grow up into your full potential at work. And that takes, some research into the companies that you are interested in applying for.
Okay. And does that really make a difference whenever looking for a job or the job that we get, if you do find that you align with their purpose? Because I think like for some people, the objection might be like, I just need a job. Like I just need something that pays the bills. So is there a benefit to that, to feeling that sense of fulfillment, having that purpose in your work?
Yeah, I mean, we've all, in whatever season of our life, just had to pay the bill. And so I am not begrudging anybody that, because we've all been there. But I think there's two things. One, you do have to, earn a living to pay the bills. But I think you can also look deeply in what you're doing and peel back the onion to kind of figure out, how can I make this more purposeful? I thought of a gal that I'm, good friends with, and she just took a new job about a year ago, and we were having coffee, and she said, Mark, how do I instill that sense of purpose in my team? And she worked for a company called Smartsheet, which is a major kind of back-end company that helps, businesses do what they do to the best of their ability. I said, well, tell me some of your clients. And she started naming some. And one she named was Pfizer. I'm like, oh, you mean Pfizer, like the one that's helping, eradicate, COVID, or at least stop the impact of it? She said, yeah. I said, are you kidding me? I mean, you're helping save lives, and your team is part of that progression, because her team supported the sales team that then worked with the clients directly. I said, you guys are the wind beneath the wings of the people that make this happen. And if it wasn't for your back engine resources and services and platforms, they wouldn't be able to do what they do. So that's what I mean by kind of like, on the surface, you might be thinking, well, here's what I do in my day job, and I feel like it's not that fulfilling or purposeful, but you got to see a bigger picture. And when you do, it'll help motivate you to do the very best you can do. And then at some point you may get promoted, or at some point you may say, this still isn't working for me, but I'm now in a financial position where I can look for something, and I've got the time, and I really want a more purposeful relationship with my work, and not just a paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also when we were talking earlier, you were talking about how people who have that purposeful mindset, they end up being better employees, which again is good for job security, but also just good for you and having that sense of fulfillment. They're more productive or effective in their work because of that purposeful growth mindset that they have.
Yeah, I think it stimulates us to be our best self. And when you feel like you're giving your best at work, you drive home happy, or you log off happy that you had a good day. And when you feel like you're doing something of value that, is greater than just the paycheck, it really does stimulate you to want to give your very best effort, maybe even donate more discretionary time. I can't even tell you how many nights and weekends I worked, and not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And I was putting effort in to make something better that ultimately I felt good about, and the team felt good about, and the results were better. And so you have to find that right balance, because you don't want to overdo it either. And I've probably been guilty throughout my career of overdoing it too. But you find that balance to where you feel like you're really in the flow, you're clicking, and that's a good place to be.
Yeah. So then, going with this, like a person has a purposeful growth mindset, how can they show that in the job search whenever they're applying for jobs? You talked about how personal branding is important in the job search. So how can a person use their personal brand, have a personal brand, or just showcase their brand to their advantage?
Yeah, that's a great point. And there's a whole chapter in there, like I mentioned, about who is brand you. So let's refer to you as brand you. We all have a personal brand, whether we know it or not. And as someone who came up in the marketing ranks, there's a marketing mix, and it's called the 4Ps. It's been around for years, but it's kind of the foundation of marketing. It's product, price, place, and promotion. Well, I've switched it around for the personal brand to be problem, packaging, performance, and promotion. And the first is problem. What problem does brand you uniquely solve? Because if someone's hiring, you've got a problem to solve. Otherwise, they wouldn't be hiring, right? And so they want to find someone who can solve problems. And then packaging is how do you look, write, speak, and act. It's kind of your packaging. How you show up, what kind of aura you put off, what kind of attitude you have, what kind of air of confidence do you exude, and not cockiness, but confidence. And then, how do you write and how do you speak in a way that's professional and comes across like you would be a valued member to the team. And then your performance is about living up to commitments. Do you have a track record of living up to your commitments? Because when someone's in an interview, everybody looks good in a suit, as they say. But how can you communicate the performance that you've achieved in solving problems in a way that will help advance that particular brand? And then finally, promotion is how do you stand out? How does brand you stand out from anybody else? There's a lot of people applying. How do you stand out? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And today we live in a digital world. Yes, everyone's going to want to have a resume, but a resume is only two-dimensional and it only hits the highlights. So I have found that people who connect through social media, and if you're in the working world and you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing the boat, because that is the foundational platform for jobs and professional services and networking, right? So it's also important that you create content. And it could be a blog, it could be just a post here and there, or it could be you commenting on a post or a research article you saw and you adding your own thought to it. And it could be on who you follow, because those are questions that are going to come up in your interview. I guarantee you. And if you listen to podcasts, who do you listen to? Why? And what do you get out of it? There is so much richness now in digital communication that it now creates you in 4 dimensions, actually, because you get to bring it to life. But having a blog, for sure, having a well set up LinkedIn page, and then going through and commenting on things that demonstrate you are a purposeful person, like what's of interest to you that is over and above the work. Are you into philanthropy? Are you into charity? Are you into volunteering? Are you into the environment? Are you into whatever it happens to be? Demonstrates that you're a very well-rounded person. And anybody that, has graduated from school, no one asks you about your grade point. They just know that, okay, you graduated, you check that box, you must be smart enough to get through. If you've worked somewhere else before, they're going to say, okay, what has that person done? And what results did they achieve? What problems did they solve? But then they're going to round it out and they're going to take a look and they're going to do some cyber stalking and they're going to go look at your social media presence. So I counsel younger people today that be careful what you post on social media. You may think, TikTok or Insta or Facebook or whatever is innocuous, but it's not. People can see everything and they can make decisions. They're not going to tell you, but you're going to maybe hear, we've decided to move in a different direction.
Yeah.
If you don't protect your personal brand by what you post.
Yeah. I know just from being with JobScan and talking to other recruiters and hiring managers, they do look at LinkedIn at least. It's kind of a fuller profile of you than what they get through your resume. But yeah, any social media, I know I've been in interviews where they said that they Googled me and saw other stuff that I had done. And I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't have anything bad up there. But I'm curious. So one of the things that you talked about was being a problem solver. So for you as a hiring manager, was that like one of the number one things that you looked for is, are they a problem solver? And then I guess also like, what would that mean
in practical terms on the resume or in the interview, how do I show that I am that kind of candidate or person?
Yeah, and studies have shown that problem solving is up near the very top, if not the very top thing that recruiters look for or hiring managers look for. And as I mentioned earlier, we deal with problems in our work all day, every day, and they want to know how you think. So it's important to not just say, worked on this project, got these results, but you want to maybe put a point about, how you may have overcome something that was unforeseen. And it may not be that you can put that on a resume for it to be too long, but you're going to want to make sure that it's part of your interview story. And storytelling is the best form of communication. I mean, Disney's made billions over the years because they're the world's best storyteller. So it's packaging your experiences, how you've solved problems, and how you personally overcame challenges that a hiring manager is going to listen to and say, it's not so much what was done. They want to see how you think. And that's so important because their business may be totally different than the one you're talking about. But the thought process and the critical thinking that went into your results, how you achieved them, how you overcame problems to get there is so important.
Yeah. I think also so kind of along those lines of um, being able to give details about that. One other career coach that I talked to, she talked about controlling the narrative. So answering the question, but then what you were saying of really give the full story and your thought process through the whole thing. And that really shows them that skill that you have. So yeah, that's a good point.
And controlling the narrative, I like that because what I was going to say is next is that you want to be interviewing them every bit as much as they're interviewing you.
Yeah.
You have to be respectful, and they get to ask the questions because you're there, to interview with them. But then also it'll demonstrate again confidence. Confidence is such an attractive trait. It's like a magnet. But you got to be careful that you don't want to go over the line into cockiness.
Yeah.
Okay. But competence would suggest that it's okay for you to ask their questions. You may say, what purpose is this company really stand for? Is there something that is part of the DNA that I should be aware of? And let them talk about it, right? And then, you'll have done your research, and much like they can cyber stalk you. I hate to use this word. It sounds really bad, but it is what it is. You can find out about them on their LinkedIn page. So it's important you do your research in advance to know not just the company you're researching, but the people that you're researching. Because it says, where did they go to school? Or it says, where else have they worked? It says, some things that might be helpful to you as you're asking them questions. I've never been in an interview where I've been the hiring manager and I've never said, what questions do you have for me? And oftentimes that's like a tiebreaker, because if someone doesn't take the time to prepare thoughtful questions and they're just spouting off their resume and kind of making it a one-sided conversation, that's not what I look for. I look for well-rounded people who come in authentically them. They're not putting on airs, and they're people that I would want to, hire and work with.
Yeah. Does that feed into so talking about your purpose and who you are, is that also part of what you were saying about how that shows them how you think? You might think that, talking about my purpose and all all of that it's not really relevant to this job of doing copywriting or whatever. But really there's the other stuff that they're trying to find out is how do you think, how do you handle situations? And so while you might not be asked those questions directly, by talking about who you are, why you do what you do, that could help them to get the idea of just what kind of employee you are, which is important to them.
Now, and a couple of things is I believe words matter. And so I use the word team member versus employee, because if you ever played on a team and, growing up, the importance of playing a role and feeling like you're part of something bigger than yourself. And there's a sense of duty that goes into it versus an employee maybe just be someone who's, again, just looking to get a job and draw a paycheck. A team member is someone who's there for the team and will play whatever role they're asked to play to the best of their ability. And they don't want to let the other teammates down. And so if you think about being a team member, you want to demonstrate what roles you can play when you answer their question. They want team players. Trust me, everybody's trying to improve their culture. And that's another word I don't necessarily like. I believe in the word community. A culture may just be a place you feel merely a part of. It's not bad, but a community is a place you may feel you truly belong in. And that is so important. Belonging is so critical because if you don't have that, the rest of it doesn't matter. And people who don't feel like they belong will ultimately leave. And we understand the cost of replacing somebody, not only going back through the whole hiring and training process, but it puts a extra workload on people when that position may not be filled for a while. And that may not go over too well because likely those people are covering and not getting paid anymore. And so there's a downward spiral that goes if you get it wrong. And so that's where it's so important that there is an alignment, a fit between that team member and their leader, their hiring manager that's bringing them on board so that both sides win. 1 + 1 can equal 3 if we do it right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all of this is so important because a lot of times as a job seeker, we just think about the skills on our resume and our work experience, which is very important, but it's like half of it. And then the other half, whenever you get into the interviews, is what kind of employee you are, how you handle certain situations. Are you going to be a good fit on the team? Like all of those things are just as important as your skills. If you have a person that's really skilled, but they're just a horrible person to work with, it's not going to work. Like that, you're not going to be part of the team. So this about being able to have the purposeful growth, to have the why and caring about who you're working for, and then being able to communicate that in practical ways on your resume and social media and so on. I think that cannot be overlooked. It really is a strong part of why a person is hired. So yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Sydney, you're dead on.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mark, thank you so much for this. So much good information in here. I'm sure there's more in the book. For people listening, how can they find it? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, the Purposeful Growth Revolution, 4 ways to grow from leader to legacy builder. It's available on Amazon in all forms, as I mentioned, hardcover, softcover, Kindle ebook, as well as an audiobook. And then you can go to my website at markamears, MEARS.com. And when you get there, you'll see right up the top is a Purposeful Growth Self-Assessment. And it's free, takes you about 6 or 7 minutes to fill out. And then when you're completing it, you can literally get a download of a full color PDF report with your customized scores and some helpful tips from me. And so that's really the place that I would start. And then hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you and keep our conversation going.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks everyone for listening. Follow him on LinkedIn. But thank you for all these insights.
My pleasure, Sydney. Thank you for having me on today.